and welcome to the Sunday Guardian show with Joyeeta Basu. Viewers, where is Xi Jinping? Why did he not go to BRICS in Rio de Janeiro? Why are such rumors floating around about, that he's about to be deposed, that he's going to flee the country? And if you see X, I mean, it's full of rumors. At the same time, there are rumors about, what Trump and Xi have been talking to each other, that Trump may be going to Beijing. So, what exactly is going on? And this is also taking place at a time when suddenly the Chinese are very, very friendly towards us. And so many of our people, including a bunch of journalists, have gone to Manasarwar. So, what is going on? To make sense of this, I have one of the most acclaimed and well known China observers in India, Jayadeva Ranade, who is president of the think tank Center for China Analysis and Strategy. Until recently, he was a member of the National Security Advisory Board. And in his capacity as additional secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat some time back, maybe we can call him our man in China. Thank you, Mr. Ranade, for coming to this show.
Thank you, Joyeeta. It's a pleasure.
Okay. So, Mr. Ranade, tell me, what is this mystery surrounding Xi's quote-unquote disappearance and the fact that he did not go to BRICS? And what are these wild rumors that are doing the rounds of X, where I see senior, sensible people who are talking about how Xi is on his way out?
Xi has been a sort of a mystery for a number of people ever since he took over. He took over after almost a year of political turbulence in China. You know, the, shall I say, contest between another princeling, Po Xilai, and him. Both children of revolutionary founder members of the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, Po Xilai's father, Po Ipo, was called one of the 8 immortals. But ever since Xi Jinping took over, in fact, within a day of his taking over, he set a new tone for administration or for, shall I say, running the country. And he unleashed within a year anti-corruption campaign which continues till today. It's unprecedented. He brought the PLA, which is one of the 3 pillars of the Chinese state, within the purview of this anti-corruption campaign, which is a party-led campaign, which again was something unprecedented. So he's done a number of things like that. But in the process, he has also appointed his own people in key positions, and he has taken over what are called the chairmanships of the Central Small Leading Groups. Now, the Central Small Leading Group is the final authority or the body that really takes all the decisions for either the departments of the party or of the government. It's, as the name suggests, there are 6 or 7 members there who run it. An equivalence in India, if we look for one, is something like our empowered group of ministers or the empowered group, which combines all the decision-making authority. So he has done that. And not many, and all his, the people whom he's appointed, his closest advisors, are people who have worked with him in the provinces for about 20 years ago or so. So not much is known about him. He's kept his counsel to himself. He doesn't normally express his opinions, except now when he was vice president, now when he's president, when he gives his, shares his, if I may say, within quotes, thoughts with everyone on almost every subject. But that is the mystery, that people don't know whether messages sent to him actually get through, who his closest advisors are, or what exactly he's thinking, what his next move is going to be. So that's, I think, that adds to the mystery of Xi Jinping. He's kept his family, though he has been taking his wife with him to a number of places. His family has generally been kept under wraps. There's not much news out about the family except his daughter, who studied in Harvard and is back there. So that I think contributes to the mystery. As far as these rumors about his going, etc. are concerned, I don't subscribe to them, in the sense that I find Um, I mean, yes, he's been there for a long time. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with him and his policies for various reasons. But I don't see any signs of his position being threatened. He has put in place a very compact, comprehensive security apparatus to look after his not only just security, but his political security, which means threats or plots by others against him. And it is very difficult for them to really do that. So that is how I would say that it is there. Uh, this rumor about escaping or fleeing the country, uh, it will. The last such attempt was by Lin Piao. I mean, a major person, but I don't see that happening. Too much is required to be done, unless he's assisted by other elders to get out of the country. Then no signs of that either. I think if at all there is a replacement, it will be done within the party when either he'll be made to step down or he would step down on his own. So I don't think that will be there. Your final question about BRICS, there's no stated reason why he didn't go. But I will mention one interesting point, which is that Prime Minister Modi, when he went to BRICS, they had tied up, the government of India had tied up that it would be a state visit, which means he will have all the pomp and show, he'll have the banquet, etc. And Xi Jinping, I think, didn't want to be outshone by a person he perceives as a competitor for the number one slot, at least in Asia, which is China's ambition to be the top dog here. So I think that could be one reason. But interesting is that the official newspapers of the Chinese Communist Party and the central television, which is run by the Chinese Communist Party, they have made it a point over the last week of emphasizing the importance of BRICS for China and how China gives it a lot of credence and how they feel that it is a major movement that has come up. So I think, and Putin has joined in recently, but I don't think, I mean, I think they're doing that to balance the fact that Xi Jinping did not go. Of course, if I can just add one comment, I think it has cost them because with Modi attending the BRICS, he has actually got them to come out with a statement criticizing the Pahalgam attack, which is something that China had prevented thus far. And the second thing is that they came out demanding or asking for a reform of the UN Security Council. Again, something that China has not wanted and not allowed to be expressed. So I think to that extent, it was a coup pulled off by us.
Yeah, because I remember reading the Kazan Declaration of last year's 2024. They did not even talk about, they were talking about terrorism in Afghanistan.
Yes.
No mention about terrorism, you know how India is a victim and all. And they added, this time they added the word, SC
Yeah.
with UN.
Yes. And if you recall, just at the SCO meeting recently, where
Yes.
Defense Minister Rajnath Singh had gone, they referred to the terrorism in Balochistan, but not Pahalgam.
So, it was very good for India that he did not go.
Yes.
I mean, that he did not go to Rio, Xi Jinping. There's a rumor that she suffers from paranoia. Is that a fact? Or is it just a rumor?
Well, I am aware that till about 2015, 2016, um, he had a lot of security around him. And there were credible reports that even at his residence, that is inside Chungnan High, which is the leadership compound in the heart of Beijing, he used to move bedrooms. So that was
Move bedrooms.
move bedrooms. That was
Okay.
paranoia then. Now I haven't been hearing that, but there are two, three things that we do know. One, that he has placed the Politburo, which is the 24 people who actually rule the country. They're all selected by him. They are under surveillance by his public security ministry. I think that does signal paranoia. The second is he has curbed their administrative authority, which means they cannot hire people and they cannot pay people unless it has been cleared by him, obviously. And the third is that the agendas for the Politburo and Politburo Standing Committee meetings, which used to be decided by the Central Committee and rather the Central Committee General Office, that now has to be approved by him personally, which means he is guarding against any surprise items on the agenda, which could include criticism of him or move for his removal. So, yes, that is paranoia. And I will only say that perhaps that is something that all dictators share, but that is facts on the ground that I have mentioned.
So, in this context, what is the internal situation like in China? I mean, what are the chances of him coming under pressure from the CCP itself? And what is the unrest? I mean, how are the Chinese, what do the Chinese think of him as their leader?
When he came in, Joyita, this is, I think, an interesting comparison which you, particularly as a journalist, could sort of try and figure out. When he came in, for the first 3 to 4 years, he was very popular. The way he cracked down on corruption in the army, among the party bureaucrats, the common man was very happy. Obviously, the party bureaucrats and the army officers were not. But he did crack down on them. What happened after that, soon after that, were that his policies also constrained the growth of private business because he preferred state owned enterprises, which is like our PSUs, to actually do the heavy lifting in the economy. He thought that with their capital and with their technological assets, they'd be able to do a better job rather than the private sector. So he ignored them. Mind you, that is though the private sector contributes to 80% of the employment and 70% of the revenue generated for the state. So that was one policy. The second is his policies of frugality, where he said he has come out famously with this one soup and four dishes should be the norm for even banquets when you're entertaining foreigners. Now, which means a lot of the restaurants, etc., had to fold up because they couldn't, their revenues dried up. And a lot of the organizations that used to host banquets, they had to stop because they had to comply with these instructions that he brought out, where he said that unless you have a foreigner, you cannot have a banquet, etc., etc. So these are things that contributed to dissatisfaction, which was growing. The other major cause was his bringing the PLA within the ambit of the anti corruption campaign, which was led by the party, by the Central Discipline Inspection Commission. And within, I think, by 2016, September, there were 150 officers of the rank of Major General and above who had been dismissed. Now, being dismissed in the PLA on charges of corruption means that you get nothing, no financial benefits, etc., either to you or to your family. And normally you get a bullet in the head if you're convicted. So many people, in fact, committed suicide so that the families would get the money and they would be spared the ignominy of being corrupt, called corrupt. So this was another cause for dissatisfaction. But I think the key cause was during COVID, when the very harsh measures that he brought in, which is that even if there was one instance of a person being struck with COVID in a household, regardless of whether it was a child or a mother or father, that person was picked up and put into a quarantine, state-run quarantine. Then the food supplies coming to all these places, because the entire city was under sort of gated situation. Food used to come through like what we have, Swiggy and Zomato, etc. But if there was an outbreak of COVID in a particular locality, these people could not function there, they could not go there, so the people there starved. So there was a lot of anger against these systems. The third were the security measures that he brought in. Facial recognition, your neighbors reporting on you, your residents reporting on you, etc. This led to a lot of dissatisfaction, and academics, reputed people began writing open letters criticizing him. So I think all this piled up together, and by 2017, his popularity was on the decline, sharp decline, I would say. So there was a lot of resentment. Of course, he also moved in, and this is the political part. He moved in for a third term, and he set the stage for the third term at the second time, that is 2017 Party Congress. where he amended the rules. There was a lot of dissatisfaction. There were a lot of protests within the Central Committee, which is, the third highest body in the Chinese Communist Party, saying that this is not correct. Some people went to the extent of saying, we don't want to return to the one-man rule of Mao, that kind of stuff. But of course, the next party Congress, Xi Jinping is back, and we see no signs of a successor waiting in the wings. There's one person who fits the age profile, which is the Vice Premier Ting Shui-xiang, who is also in the Politburo Standing Committee, which is at the apex, but he hasn't been given the job of Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, which is the key for taking over. So, yes, Xi Jinping is, I would say, extremely suspicious, very wary of the people around him. But at the same time, as I just spelled out, I don't see signs of his coming under threat. It will be very difficult for people to really plot against him. It's not impossible, I suppose, but it will be very difficult.
How is the economic situation like in China right now?
Very bad. It's very bad. We are not getting the half of it from the Chinese sources, but the Chinese media, official media, does give hints as to the state of affairs. For example, they used to publish reports of the amount of unemployment and amount of joblessness in China. Those reports have been banned. They used to be put out by the Labor Bureau. The Chinese have said those will be stopped. So for the last year and a half or two, that's over. It doesn't come. Reports of protests, those have been stopped. So even small protests, either we pick them up from the videos put out by the public, otherwise officially there are no reports. And mind you, they used to be published otherwise by the public security departments. Now that is minimized. So we have to wait till the annual budgets are put out or till the Congress to pick up hints of the extent of protest. But there are protests taking place in China. So there is a lot of dissatisfaction, I'd say. And the joblessness is in hundreds of thousands. A lot of the people who went back during COVID to the villages haven't returned. A lot of the factories have shut down. The manufacturing, index of indicating how much manufacturing they've done, that's down. So there is a lot of dissatisfaction, and that has led to a social phenomenon called thumping or lying flat. So the youngsters are saying, what's the point of working when we're not getting any jobs? The party is worried. They've started going around and talking to the youngsters, saying, we are giving you jobs. The youngsters say, yes, but if I'm qualified in chemistry, you're asking me to work as a laborer. Why should I? So that's the kind of situation in China today.
If we can talk a little bit about China and the US, and specifically the two figures of Mr. Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump, is there a possibility that they have already cut some sort of a deal? And will President Trump be so amenable to Xi's wishes that we may even see him sometime, as it has already been discussed, that he may even turn up in Beijing on September 3rd, along with Mr. Putin, and the three of them on the same stage, and that will be quite a spectacle.
It
So,
will
do
be.
you think there is some kind of a deal has been cut between them?
I don't think a deal has been cut yet. I mean, at least there are no indications. The only deal that we can see is the one where the Americans were cracking down on Chinese students coming to study in the US, particularly on STEM subjects, etc., many of whom are affiliated with the PLA and who have come there. But I think Xi Jinping pulled a rabbit out of the hat when he said, okay, in that case, we are turning off the tap and no rare earths for you. So you saw the United States crumble immediately, the backtrack, Trump himself apologizing, no, I personally was in favor. So I think that's done and dusted, at least for the moment. But what we do see are one very unpredictable gentleman, which is Trump, who is conscious of America's strength and he's using it for, trying to build up the financial strength of the United States. And you have China, where Xi Jinping again is a tough person, mentally and physically, I would say, mentally definitely, and his character shows it. And he is very clear and so far has been unwavering. When I say so far, remember it's since 2012 when he took over till today. He's been unwavering in his effort to make China number one. that means to replace the United States. And that's the challenge, in fact, that the US has in front of it, if they've realized it, if they're able to deal with it. But what Trump is doing at the moment doesn't seem to be really taking the Chinese head on. So let's see. But Trump is reputed to be a deal maker. And to answer your question, he might land up in Beijing to see if he can cut a deal. But it'll be a sign of capitulation if he goes to Beijing to strike a deal.
So, from what you are saying, it's basically about between the two of them, Trump is the one who is likely to bend much before even she thinks of bending.
So far, unless of course Trump also digs his heels in, then they will be headed for a standoff. But on the rare earths, as I said, the United States has already
Caved in.
caved in. And here I feel that the policy that the US is following of applying more and more controls and sanctions on trade, etc., I think that has limited utility as far as China is concerned. The Chinese, and I know I'm digressing a bit here, but the Chinese have started preparing for the West to turn against them since 2019, 2020, around the time of COVID. In fact, at that time, their PLA official magazine, in an editorial, their state security ministry and their leading think tank, or the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, in briefings to the Politburo, said that the situation inside China is becoming very tense, and the Western powers may utilize this opportunity to light the fire and create a conflagration. So we have to be very careful. So that is it's an ominous warning actually, which they gave the Politburo. So that is the situation that confronts them. But Xi Jinping is determined to push ahead and take over as number one. That's the kind of, shall I say, focus he has so far.
Okay, in this context, if I can just ask about, because are we witnessing some sort of a policy change from the US when it, unlike even I would say until the Biden administration was also perhaps more strident towards Xi Jinping, and Trump doesn't seem to be, this language. When we are coming to language in terms of something very interesting is happening now uh, in the Pacific. Suddenly the Americans, many of them, I would say, they're the White House press person, and then there was the defense secretary Pete Hegseth.
Excellent.
So they are suddenly talking about Asia Pacific. It is no longer in the Pacific when they're talking about it. But when you see Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, he is talking about Indo-Pacific. No, so I would say confusing signals are coming out from the US, especially in the context when it's seen Asia Pacific is a term that China insists on, so does Russia. And India is very happy with the idea of having an Indo-Pacific because it brings in Indian Ocean into the picture. And they, for that matter, they had even changed their Pacific Command to Indo-PACOM.
Yeah.
So, are we making too much of these changes in language and seeing it as that US response to China has changed, and thus India will be in trouble in terms when it comes to US seeing India as a counter to China?
I think to reach that conclusion right now may be premature. We'll have to wait and see. Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State,
Yes.
so he's actually in charge of foreign policy. He's hardline on China, known to be. So he is stuck to Indo-Pacific.
Indo-Pacific,
Indo-Pacific.
yes.
The others have, and so you can always be a bit forgiving or facetious and say, well, they don't know, and etc. But the Indian Ocean is going to be the central area of standoff, if at all, between the Chinese and the United States, because that is where most of the trade flows through. You have it's a very sensitive maritime domain. You got Taiwan, etc., right there. So whether they call it Indo-Pacific or Asia Pacific, this is the area where the action, if any, will take place. Secondly, the Quad also is really centered in this area. You have Japan, India, Australia, and of course the United States. You have the French getting involved in this area. And now you got Britain, etc., also sailing through, etc. So the centrality of the Indian Ocean, I think, is there. And now, whether they call it Asia Pacific, Indo Pacific, we'll wait and see whether it's a change of policy. But if it is, it certainly indicates an easing of pressure on China.
Yes. And in this context, now what is this sudden bonhomie that we are seeing in at least a section of the, I would say, the Indian civil society towards China? And there's a lot of, and for that matter, even China is talking in terms of, what a great, I think the ambassador here was talking in terms of the shared history, the civilizational connect between the two countries. But what is happening along the LSE? So what is going on? This is all very confusing, and suddenly our journalists are being invited to Manas Sarovar, and some of them are talking, I mean, speaking of Tibet and using the Chinese term for that. This is all very, this strange kind of duality that is going on. If you can explain that a bit.
Well, you asked a number of questions, so let me put it and split
Yes.
it into two parts. Firstly, why are the Chinese adopting a softer tone after having been on the border and tried to stare us down since April 2020, and then talked about, okay, disengagement, etc.? The reason, to my mind, is quite simple. They're in economic difficulty domestically. Their exports, and they're an export-led economy, mind you, their exports to US and Europe have dropped by 20%, which is a huge amount. And these are the two wealthiest markets for them. So they are eyeing the world's largest untapped market today, which is India. And they want to access us here. And we, on our part, have taken measures to try and restrict the unfettered flow of Chinese products into India. I don't think we've succeeded to the extent we should have, but we have certainly stopped Huawei, etc., from coming in. So that's got them worried. They're trying to come in here, and they thought that, a bit of disengagement or disengagement at the Depsang Plains and Demchok is all right. But I do follow what's happening on the border. The new formations have come up, new posts have come up, and there has been no thinning of troops on that side. So the tension, as you correctly pointed out, is still there. Their force deployment continues all along our 4,057-kilometer LAC. As far as the journalists going there, it is not just journalists. Actually, it is part of their United Front activities, and they have been systematically working on academics, on politicians, on journalists, on bureaucrats, etc., to try and soften them up and get them to be more accepting of the Chinese story and the Chinese narrative. And I'll give you two instances. I'll just take you back, and I'm sure you would have noticed it. At the time of the Doklam standoff, you will notice that
2017.
17, uh, there were some journalists or some columnists who wrote articles that actually, with slight paraphrasing, parroted the Chinese line. Um, why did that happen? And then again, you find a Chinese line coming up here and there. So that's part of the United Front, how they are softening people. They're also
Their propaganda
their
department.
propaganda department, but it is not just propaganda. It is also suborning the people through various means. For example, students going to China, or professors or senior students, doctoral students, who are doing their theses on some subject inside China or concerning China, they're dependent on the Chinese for the visas to go there for their field studies. And those visas are given only if you have quote unquote good behavior. So, and if you do, then the Chinese not only give you the visa, they facilitate your study there. So that you go around, your travels are taken care of, your stay is taken care of, and obviously you get enough funds to live fairly comfortably out there. That's the kind of thing they do. We also have journalists being taken there, and you're referring to the latest group, I suppose, but many groups have gone, and I've spoken to them. Well, each one has been very well looked after. I mean, the Chinese are very good in hospitality. I don't know what all they've done, but they've come back fairly content with the trip. And I think if you watch their writings over the next few weeks or months, I doubt whether you'll find a trace of anti or negative comment on China in their articles.
But does China seriously believe that they can change Indian public opinion against them?
They feel that by turning the media in this manner, making it pro-China, they'll succeed. But I think the media here is far too large and diverse. So you can pick up a few, and we all know, some people who've been there repeatedly. But I don't think, that's going to turn the public against. The public view, I think, in India is very clear as far as China is concerned. Until a few years ago, the Chinese used to keep telling us when we were in service, our official dumb, the External Affairs Ministry, etc., that you have to control your media. You have to educate your media. I mean, that's, as you know, it's almost an impossible task.
In this context, before I'm talking in terms of, I would like to go back a little and ask, why did they exactly start this standoff? That at that time, pre Galwan and all, why did they come into our territory, and what exactly triggered that? In 2020, this happened, April.
April. I think the decision, from what I'm aware, the decision was taken even earlier by Xi Jinping. And then the others probably spoke to him, and then he deferred the decision. He didn't abort it, he deferred it. And finally, of course, they did what they did in April 2020. But the reason for this, for doing this, was they felt that India was getting too big for its boots, as it were. It wanted to come onto the high table. It was seeking membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. It was gunning for the UN Security Council membership, etc. And the Chinese didn't like that. They thought that India has to be brought down. I would say more than a peg. That was their attempt. Because they also have in mind, and I mentioned this earlier, that they will be the number one in Asia. But they found that India, if it gets this profile, India will be a serious challenger in Asia too. So they didn't want that to happen. And that was an attempt to do that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, do they still feel like that? And what are the possibilities that this, number one, he has domestic trouble for which he may need to divert attention by maybe some sort of limited military action. At the same time, he still thinks, he has every reason to think that India is becoming too big. We are becoming big. We did manage to get the UNSC in the BRICS, and we are being talked about. And
No,
it's a fact that what happened, they did get a drubbing in Operation Sindoor. So, what does
no,
he decide now? What does he do now?
no, definitely. Sindoor, as you notice, they played a propaganda game with the Pakistanis trying to drown us out. Fine, but the facts will tell on the ground. People, I mean, others are all watching. They've got also eyes in the sky, etc. So everyone is watching it, and they will be doing their own forensic studies. So I think it's while people may have different views, I don't think I think we've come off quite well in Operation Sindoor. As far as what the Chinese think, I think they misfired by doing what they did in April 2020. Now, what can they do? They can withdraw, but I doubt whether they're going to. They're going to try and keep us under pressure. The sheer deployment of the troops will keep us under pressure, will keep our forces up there. Though we are battle hardened, our troops are used to high altitudes, but still, um, it does mean cost, etc., to keep the forces deployed there. And of course, this perpetual threat of instigating something on the western border with Pakistan. So they will try that. I think they still feel that India will continue to try and come up. Um, I think they don't like the present government because the present government is also trying to, help India grow and reach its optimum capacity. They don't want that. So these tensions will continue. And I think I'll just point to one flashpoint that is now in the making, which is the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. You will
Yeah.
find that the Chinese have already started making statements. As someone was telling me the other day, how does it bother the Chinese if one 90-year-old gentleman decides to reincarnate? But the Chinese have made it an issue, and they are trying to drag us into it. I don't see why.
Yeah, so what exactly is, why are they so worried about, if they have such control over the situation in Tibet? Why are they so worried about the Dalai Lama? And in fact, you have been talking in terms of that we may come to a situation where there are two Dalai Lamas. If you can, please explain a bit on that.
You answered the question yourself actually when you said if they've got Tibet under control, why they're worried. Obviously, they don't have it under the kind of control they have. The Dalai Lama, though he's been out of Tibet for so long, he still has a lot of influence inside Tibet among the Tibetans. I'll give you one example. A few years ago, if you remember, there was a lot of illegal um, uh, trapping of animals for their furs, etc. And that the furs and the skins are prized possessions of the Tibetan people. And someone brought that to the notice of the Dalai Lama, saying that in India there's a lot of this smuggling going on and all that. So can we do something? And he did issue an appeal, and there were bonfires in Tibet of people, burning their furs, etc. Bonfires which were spotted via satellite. So there were a lot of them. That shows the kind of influence he has. There are 6 million Tibetans inside China. Now, latest figures are 7 million. They have been peaceful so far. Uh, I think the Chinese are very worried that if they become like the Uyghurs, if they become violent, they will have a huge problem on their hands. That's one concern they have. The second is that if the reincarnation becomes more assertive or more aggressive, then of course you will have this problem again. So they will have to contend with two Dalai Lamas. I'm confident of that. One will be born inside China under their control, and the Panchen Lama, who's been chosen by them, will be his guide, etc. The other will be the one found here and in outside China, and the people will go with it. So I think they don't want that because they feel that the international community will back that Dalai Lama and will use him as a pressure on China for raising all kinds of issues, human rights, etc. So that's their worry. I think they have no real ground, as you know, to object to it. They are supposed to be communists, which means they should be atheists. They should not be involved in all this. But they've concocted history to talk about every Dalai Lama being selected through this lottery system of the golden urn and being approved by Beijing, which is incorrect. I think there are only two or maybe three who have been approved. So I think this is a geopolitical game that they're trying to play. And certainly it is something that will put us under pressure. But the Americans have already come out with this Tibet Resolve Act saying that it is the choice of the Dalai Lama and only his choice will be acceptable or will be legitimate. So I think the lines are being drawn, and the Chinese will certainly raise the ante as far as the Tibetans are concerned.
And then what about the next Dalai Lama being found in India? What?
He can be found in India. He can be found anywhere for that matter in the free world. My own hunch is he'll be found somewhere around Tibet or around China where access to him would be easy for the Tibetans. India is, of course, the best bet. Other countries will, not be able to stand up to Chinese pressure. So India is certainly an option. Could be born to a Tibetan family either in Bailakupe down south or in Arunachal or in Ladakh, both areas where the Chinese have laid claims, territorial claims. But he could be born anywhere. Could be born in Sikkim for all you know. But there are, I think it's too early to sort of forecast where he's going to come or predict where he's going to come. But I think the Dalai Lama has made it very clear now with this latest uh, statement of his. Now, where he will be reincarnated, how he will be reincarnated, he hasn't spelled out. So we'll have to wait and see.
Here, if you can explain for our viewers, of course, you know the question I have already asked you once. The thing is, it's about how does China exercise control over a section of the Tibetan clergy in terms of, how do they exercise control and what sort of influence these people under China's influence do have over the Tibetans?
Uh, Firstly, let me just clarify that as far as the Tibetans are concerned, they venerate the Dalai Lama as God, reincarnate. Avalokiteshvara, reincarnation of Vishnu, etc. So they have that belief. It's a very firm belief. Uh, and no matter what the Chinese have tried or others have tried, their belief has remained unshaken. The second part is the monasteries. They exercise a lot of influence. It's like the church and the parish. The priest has a lot of influence on the parishioners. He normally tells them which direction to go, whom to vote for, or whatever. Same thing happens here. Of course, they don't have voting, but the monks enjoy a lot of status. You would have been to Thailand and all. Also, you'd have seen the kind of veneration that the monks receive. Now, though the Chinese have exerted a lot of control, a lot of pressure, mounted a lot of pressure on the monasteries, tried to cut down the number of monks who are coming in, etc., they haven't succeeded because we still see instances of protest across Tibet and all done by monks. You remember the spate of self-immolation that took place, and then this. Even now, there are protests taking place, and of course, the monk is arrested, he's punished, he's put into jail, but they continue. Maybe few and far between, but they still happen. What the Chinese have done is they have posted what are called monastic cadres. So, monks who are singing their tune, or people who they have brought in and said, you study the scriptures and become a monk, they are actually cadres. So, they receive salaries, they receive allowances, they receive pensions. So, they become, for all practical purposes, employees of the state. And they are there to keep an eye on the other monks to see how the monastery is maintained, to see whether photographs of the Dalai Lama or other lamas are put up there or not. So that is the kind of controls that they have brought in. The third aspect is that they have told the monks that you must adapt Tibetan Buddhism to socialism with Chinese characteristics. Now, you can't imagine a more weird thing, but that's how they're doing it. And that is the instruction given to the China appointed Panchen Lama also. So that means you have to, shall I say, tailor Tibetan Buddhism to fitting in with this, which means, in other words, that the Buddhist Association will be the prime doctrinal source or the interpreter of Buddhist doctrine for all these people. That is what they're trying to do.
Yeah, so basically, what it means is that they will also get a socialist, communist Dalai Lama, and India will basically have to stay very strong. And already the Prime Minister has given the indication by wishing Dalai Lama
Yes.
on his 90th birthday, and which has angered China. So India will have to be very, very firm when it comes to its stand on the Dalai Lama. Before I move to the last question, a quick question in terms of how does India stack up militarily when it comes to China?
Well, we have a way to go, but that doesn't mean that we are going to just roll over. I mean, our troops are battle hardened. We are used to being on the altitudes. From what I see in the Chinese media, of late particularly, the Chinese have increased the salaries and allowances being paid to troops deployed on the Tibetan plateau, their troops, the Chinese troops, indicating that the people are reluctant to go. We also saw that when they tried to recruit Mongolians from Inner Mongolia and Uyghurs, they protested and said that, you hire the Hans, there are many more Hans than us. So there is this going on. They're finding it difficult to get troops for deployment on the Tibetan plateau. They made life much easier for them. So there are those pressures. But I think as far as we are concerned, the Chinese have a lot of money. They pumped a lot of money into all kinds of high-tech equipment and modern equipment. But the bottom line is, one, that equipment is untested in actual battle conditions. And second, the troops themselves are untested in actual battle conditions. So we'll see. Maybe, we might not be able to, as they say, win the battle, but the Chinese will definitely get a bloody nose. I don't think it will be a short, swift conflict the way the Chinese would like it. I think it will be bloody and protracted, and the Chinese will also suffer. And remember that when a big power like China suffers a setback, it's like a defeat. For a smaller country, it's, you're coming out okay.
Yeah, the last question. You have been stationed in China. How tough is it to be an Indian government employee in China?
Well, if you
Especially given your job profile. Let's put it this way.
if you're in the embassy, uh, you are under surveillance. And at the time when I was there, I mean, things have become more sophisticated now. But our houses were bugged. We knew it. Wherever you went, you were under surveillance. They'd already started becoming high tech. So instead of a man following you around, they had cameras all over, which would pick up where your car is. Unless you're under active surveillance, then of course you had people following you. So that way you had to be very careful. The phones were all monitored. I'll give you one example, or rather two examples. The building where I stayed, the flat where I stayed, we were on the second floor. It was a three-storied building, two flats on each floor. So you could walk up and down, and there was a lift, of course. You didn't need a operator for the lift, but we had an operator. There was a lady who would operate it as per communist office timings or anyone's office timings from 10 to 5. So naturally, you wanted to do something, it has to be after that. But they had cameras all over. But I'm just giving you an idea. But she knew who's coming, who's going, and she would wait. The lift would wait till the visitor entered your flat. So she was sure that he's coming in. The guard at the gate of the compound, he would know who's coming in. And if it was a Chinese or a person who looked like a Chinese, he would ask them questions. Where are you going? Whom are you going to meet? And why are you going? So that was the kind of surveillance we had. The phones were monitored. So you had to live under that kind of situation, all the time. And it can get a bit troubling, particularly for the family, etc. Kids were very small, but certainly for the wife, she knew that, you were being watched. And I'll give you the second example, what happened. One day we came back, we had gone out somewhere, we returned in the evening, and the doorbell rang, and my upstairs neighbor, who was a Swiss diplomat, he came down and he said, can I just look around in your drawing room? So I said, it's a strange request, but sure. And I said, we just come back. And he went to, you know, near the front door on one side, and he began looking. I said, what are you looking for? He said, oh, someone has come up to my flat and he's done something. I'm waiting to see whether, and then he said, so here. So there was a little bit of dust at one corner. And he said, so they have, actually done something with the wiring. And so I went up to his flat to see what, and there, of course, it was more obvious what had been done. So obviously they were fixing the surveillance systems. But that is the kind of watch that we have to keep when you're there.
Well, that's a tough life being a government representative in Beijing. I wonder what all they do now. I mean, thank you so much for coming to this show, Mr. Ranade. It was absolutely enjoyable. I'm certain my viewers will love it absolutely. There's so much to know about.
It's been a pleasure to be here, and time has flown, I must say.
Yeah,
Thank you very
yeah.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Until the next time.